Hello, everyone. We are fortunate to be joined here today for another flawless talk, this time featuring the co chair of our board of directors, Dr. George Giuliani. George is a full time associate professor at Hofstra University School of Education, as well as a clinical psychologist and an avid football fan who attends every NFL draft with his son, Colin. So, thanks for joining us here today, George.
Great to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So, George, as the co-chair of the board, you know how we get things started at Flawless. So, obviously, how are you really doing today, George?
I'm doing great. Actually, doing great. We're wrapping up the semester at Hofstra. The weather is beautiful here in New York. I have my health, which matters most with everything, and family is doing well. Friends are well. So things are really good right now. Thanks for asking. Hope you're doing well too.
It's awesome. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well too. Yeah.
Good.
Good to hear. Good to hear. So of course, all of us here are big NFL fans who love the draft season. So I want to ask you, George, what was it like for you to actually be in Kansas City where they held the 2023 draft this year? And what started this annual tradition between you and your son to kind of attend every NFL draft?
Sure. Well, my son Colin at a very early age became an avid football fan. Now, I was always a football fan. But Colin became an avid football fan. He took it to the next level. And I realized as a father, I was going to go with his passion. And his passion was football. So it was going to be about football. And we were going to do everything we could to be football fans. And his favorite team happens to be the Jacksonville Jaguars. We're not from Jacksonville. We have no family in Jacksonville. We know nobody in Jacksonville, but he became a true Jacksonville Jaguar fan. And at 8 years old, I took him to his first Jacksonville Jaguar game. We flew down. We saw them play the Cowboys on opening day, and he fell in love with the NFL even more at that point. So it became watching football and more football, et cetera. And then we recognized something, that the NFL draft was literally in our backyard. We're from Long Island, and the NFL draft every year at that time was held at Radio City Music Hall. So we had said, why don't we go to the NFL draft? Well, Colin fell in love with the draft. We became part of the draft. We even wrote to the Jacksonville Jaguars as New York fans and said, look, we're going to the draft, and heard from the owner, Shad Khan, saying, let us give you tickets. So we actually got tickets from the owner of he was the new owner of the Jaguars. And so we actually got seats for the draft at Radio City. And so it started this love affair with the NFL draft. And from there, we did it again at Radio City again. And then Roger Goodell realized he had a serious marketing this is bigger than Radio City. You know, Radio City, if you've been to New York City, it's beautiful, but that's all it is. It's Radio City. And Roger Goodell realized, hold on, we have all these people watching the draft. What if we made this an event? What if we made it into an event? And so then he took it to Chicago on the road and put it in a park, and all of a sudden hundreds of thousands of people were coming out for the draft. So it then went to Chicago, and then we went to Nashville, and we were in Cleveland, and we were in Vegas, and then just recently in Kansas City. So when I tell you it's an unbelievable experience to be a part of all these football fans and to do it with my son, it's amazing. It's an amazing 3 days of football where ultimately, when you break it down to its core, you're just picking names. That's all the NFL draft is. It's just we're just picking names, but it's become an event. And it's a really fun event. I recommend it to anybody if it ever comes to your city, and you have an opportunity. It's a great time. So it was wonderful. Kansas City was an amazing host. They had a beautiful venue. People are super friendly, and it was great.
Yeah, so what you just said is interesting. It kind of ties into my next question. So, as you know, we are creating a documentary and an online course for high school students, kind of based on the experience of athletes. And you say from the fan perspective, it's this huge event where we're just picking names. But when you watch the draft, you also see the emotion that comes from the draft from those that have a different perspective, which is those athletes who are changing their life, accomplishing their dreams. So we've kind of used and tried to teach emotional intelligence a lot, but you're a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, so you probably understand it a lot better than most. So just being able to witness this in person, this NFL draft, seeing, young men getting drafted, you've seen their families, seeing people cry, tears of joy, tears of accomplishment. So when you're seeing this, what are kind of your thoughts after you see the reaction of some of these players after seeing their dreams come true?
Sure. Well, let me take you back a little bit. So you're 6 or 7 years old and you're playing pee wee football, right? And you're loving the game and you're playing pee wee football with your buddies, and everybody's about the same in pee wee football. And then as you start to get a little bit older, people are saying you're pretty good. You're pretty good. So you keep playing football. And then you get to middle school and you're playing middle school, and all of a sudden you're pretty good. And people are saying you're a good player. You're a good player. You should play high school ball. And then you get to high school ball and you're playing high school ball, and people say, you might be able to play college ball. You may have something here. And so it's built, and then someone from college recruits you. And then you potentially get a scholarship to go play football at college. And then you're at college and people are saying, if you play well, you might make the NFL with it. So this process is going on from 6, 7 years old, and you're playing, and people are saying you have an opportunity. You could be drafted. Scouts are here. People are looking, and then you get invited to the combine, and people are looking at the combine, and now you're wondering what's going on. And then you're invited to that draft night. So it looks as though you're going to be drafted, but you have no idea where you're going to be drafted. So the emotion is big. And you're sitting in that green room. And I've had the opportunity every year. I go do a backstage tour. So I've been in that green room. I know what that looks like. I've been there. And you have to think in terms of these young men. They're 20, 21 years old. And they're sitting and they're waiting. There's nothing proactive at that point. It's all reactive. They're waiting on a phone call. So now imagine being 21 years old. You're sitting with your family. And at any moment, you could get the call. You're going to Green Bay. You're going to live in Green Bay. Maybe you don't get that call. And then all of a sudden now you could be in Tennessee. Then that call doesn't come in and you're waiting. Oh my gosh, you could be in San Francisco. And every moment, because they say, oh, we might pick you. We're going to pick you. You could be our guy. And then it passes. The number passes and it passes. And the emotion. And when they finally get that phone call, the amount of delay gratification that has now come to fruition is all just too much almost for the body to handle.
Yeah.
And when they walk out on that stage and you see these guys 6'7", 280, 300 pounds, giving Roger Goodell the bear hug of all bear hugs, that is a moment when you're up close, like I have been in the draft, and you see these grown men, you just see the childlike in them just break down because it's so emotional. And I have to tell you, the most fulfilling part of the draft is watching these guys get their name called and come out on stage and give Roger Goodell that big hug, because it's everything to them. But emotionally, the amount of energy it expends on these guys to get to that point it's just got to be tremendous.
Yeah, I know it, and thank you for walking us through that from 6, 7 years old to literally on the stage with Roger Goodell. I wanted to kind of see if we could all share some of our favorite moments that were filled with emotion from this year's draft. I know you were talking about like the bear hugs and things, or even like some standout emotional moments from the previous season. So George, if you have anything that comes to mind.
Yeah, there are a few really emotional moments that stand out to me. The one that without question stands out the greatest, we were in Chicago in 2015, and after the first round, in the second round, what they often do is they have NFL legends come out and announce for their team. So, for instance, if you're Pittsburgh Steelers, Terry Bradshaw or Lynn Swann might come out. If you were from Chicago, maybe Jim McMahon would come out, but someone for an NFL legend would. And in 2015, for the Buffalo Bills, unbeknownst to anybody in the audience, Jim Kelly came out, and he had just beaten cancer for the second time. And the place erupted like Jim Kelly was like their son. Jim Kelly didn't play. in Chicago. And yet everybody, there wasn't a dry eye. I still get goosebumps just talking about it. There wasn't a dry eye in there because this big strapping guy didn't look like Jim Kelly anymore, but he had beaten cancer for the second time. And the place went just emotionally. We forgot all about football at that moment. And we just looked at this man and said, thank you for everything. And we're so glad you're healthy, with it. So I think that one, without question, stands out to me first. Another one was interesting. In 2014, I was at the draft. You guys may have been too young for this. You might remember this. And it may not seem like such a big deal, but at the time it was a very big deal in 2014. It was day 3 of the NFL draft. Now, if you've ever been to day 1, it's exciting. It's big. It's a bonanza. And even day 2 is exciting. Day 3 is not. Day 3, 5 minutes on the clock. It's a lot of fun, day 3, but no players are there. No one is there to shake hands. They're calling names. There's a lot of activities. It's all football, but nothing really exciting happens on day 3. Nothing happens. Well, this was at Radio City Music Hall. We were in the 7th round. Now, you have to understand that by the 7th round, they're looking to push people up to the front of the row to make it look like there are people there at that point. There aren't that many people there. So probably half the auditorium was full at Radio City at the time. And we are now up to the 249th pick of the 7th round of the NFL draft. And they just call names out at that time. There was just an announcement. Nobody came out to even announce at that time. And all of a sudden, someone from the NFL comes out. And I'm looking at Colin. I'm like, this is someone coming out to read a name. Why is someone coming out to read the name of the 249th pick of the 7th round? Mm-hmm. And they come out and they say, with the 249th pick, the St. Louis Rams select Michael Sam from the University of Missouri. Mm-hmm. Michael Sam was the first openly gay player to be in the draft, that openly gay player. And the place went crazy with applause. Like, it was so welcoming to him. It was so like, yes, we embrace this. This is wonderful. This is, you're openly gay and you're putting it out there and we embrace you. We love you. We are taking this in at that moment. And it was just one of those emotional moments that came from out of nowhere. And no one knew it was coming with it. So that was also a very emotional moment at the draft. And then just the last one for me personally, in 2012, in the 3rd round, as a Jacksonville Jaguar fan, it was the 3rd round. We had previously taken Blaine Gabbert as our quarterback, and it was not going well for us. And in the 3rd round, Russell Wilson was available. And when Colin and I looked, he said, Russell Wilson's available. We're going to get Russell Wilson for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the Jacksonville Jaguars say, with the 3rd round pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars select punter Brian Anger. And to this day, I have a photo of Colin with a look of despair, because I was taking the picture for the Russell Wilson moment, and it's the picture of his look of Brian Anger being selected over Russell Wilson. So, I mean, I have stories, guys. Look, I could talk to you for hours about stories that I have of it. But emotionally, for me, I think Jim Kelly, I think Michael Sam, but then I think of the funny emotional moments of, Russell Wilson with things. So take it for what it's
awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing those. We'll probably have to, talk offline to, hear more about those. Those sound like great stories, more about your draft stories. Trey, did you have anything you wanted to mention regarding emotions from the draft or even the previous seasons?
For sure. The first thing I'll say is, man, George, you are a great storyteller, because both stories, Michael Sam and the Brian Anger selection, are moments that I knew being a fanatic, but even knowing those and having that in my history bank, you telling I'm following along, where is he going, and the punchline hits, man. So you're a great storyteller.
Thank you.
Those are all great draft day memories. Well, I guess not so great if you're a Jaguars fan. I do remember
Right.
seeing the reaction everywhere. They drafted a punter. Just drafting a punter that high is
Yeah.
typically unheard of. So
Unheard of.
especially for a
Right.
quarterback needy team.
Right. Right.
But yeah, just kind of I'll piggyback off that. Being a Dolphins fan, kind of a funny moment in my childhood. I think it's like 2007. All pre-draft, all pre-draft. You know, we're hearing, you know, we're going to get a quarterback. We're going to get a quarterback. Jamarcus Russell was going to the Raiders. That was a done deal. Once he threw the 60-yard bomb off his knee, like that was all a done deal. And so we just were like, okay, Brady Quinn's there. There's no way we pass on Brady Quinn. And sure enough, you know, it's a funny story with Dolphin fans because they're like, oh, we select Ted Ginn Jr. and his family. So it's just that was like a moment where everyone's like, what's like you passed off on the future Tom Brady for a receiver. And I was too young to really know anybody besides like the top 5 or 10 names in the draft. But I never heard of Ted Ginn Jr., who actually had a pretty decent career bouncing around. But that was a funny moment. I just remember my dad screaming "what" and like just the disappointment in his face. But on a more positive side, kind of again going back to your storytelling, George, just being going from someone that was 6 years old and every year being excited for the draft because I'm like, hey, maybe this is me one day, to now understanding the disappointment, not disappointment, but the realization of just how difficult it is. And anything, it makes draft day even more special to me because I know there are thousands of kids who are super talented, who work very hard, but it's a numbers game. And even despite that, it's just only 250 odd players get drafted every single year. You know, when you have more colleges that host football teams than that. So I just get such a respect for those players that make it to the big stage, get drafted high, get drafted low, wherever. I just know it's an amazing experience for them. So I, as a little kid, I was like, oh, I'd never cry. I'd be happy. Like this is, you know, but then once you kind of, your time passes and you understand how difficult it is, I really get it, you know, for those guys to work so hard and be so diligent to get to that moment and hear their name called, see the phone ring. I can imagine it being super emotional. I love the way you describe your body can't handle the emotion that you're probably kind of experiencing. So, you know, that's kind of just in general. I just love seeing the players. But I don't know if you had anything to add, Jason, about you know you witnessing the draft.
Yeah, no, I would just mention someone that I personally me and you Trey, we know Travis Homer getting drafted. I know that was a very emotional time for Oxbridge as a whole, right? The community and just like because we know him, like we talked to him still to this day, like it's not like, you know, it's a random person, but I think that's a little bit more important, like for some of like teammates that we have. Like I don't know if there's anybody at Columbia that you know in the NFL, but like at Penn, like I knew a couple people that ended up going to the NFL, people that I played against, right? Princeton receiver just got drafted this past drafts or whatever. So like I think that's also very, you know, important to mention where like we as again having that realization that, you know, it is a difficult feat, but also knowing people that we played against, played alongside, are, you know, at that level, right? Is also kind of interesting to mention in this conversation. But I guess moving on to the next question, back to George. Oftentimes athletes, especially football players, are kind of stereotyped as these tough guys to be. You have to be tough. You have to, you know, not really show any emotion at all. And while we know that feeling your emotions is one of the toughest things anyone can do, we also know that such a display of emotion can receive negative responses. What can we all learn from, you know, these men who are being so open with their emotions in this moment getting drafted?
I think that's exactly what you learn from it. I think it's a great question, which is it's okay to be emotional. It's okay. I mean, we accept it, like that Roger Goodell bear hug. That moment, nobody looks at that and goes, "Oh, what a wimp. Oh, I can't believe him. Look at him. He's acting like that." Everybody looks and goes, "Oh my gosh, that is great. That is look at that." And when you see them in the back room crying with their families and hugging their families, and you know, it's the human element of it. And I think what's even better is, and we understand this, especially post pandemic, mental health has become so critical and such an important topic of conversation, that we're so much more open with it now. So seeing men cry now, seeing tough guys cry now, we're much more comfortable with that now. We're okay, with that now. And I think the allowing of it, especially at the draft, says, we know you have to be a tough guy on the field, but this is your moment, man. This is your moment, and embrace it. And again, it's years and years of delay gratification, years and years coming to a head. And when that happens, we just go, good for these guys. Good for these guys.
Yeah, no, 100%. And just sticking to the topic of emotions and whatnot, I think you'll have an interesting perspective on this. Just you kind of already alluded to your relationship with your son Colin, and you guys are at the draft every single year. So there was also a very cool, I'm sure you saw it, but a very cool father-son moment where Kansas State running back Deuce Vaughn was drafted to the Dallas Cowboys. So this is amazing because his father, Chris Vaughn, is the assistant director of college scouting. So there's a whole video out where you kind of see his dad got to make the call. Chris called Deuce to say, hey, you want to come work with me? And now it's kind of him letting him know, like, hey, yeah, we're drafting you to my team, to the Dallas Cowboys. So just as a father, what's your perspective on a moment like that?
Yeah. Well, first, it's very interesting because when his name was called, by the way, the place went crazy because he's from Kansas State and we were in Kansas City. So so many people knew him. They had followed his career, so they had known of him. So people were pretty excited for him. I don't know what might be better than that as a father, but if my kid is trying to become an NFL player and he is drafted, I can't imagine as a dad, like, that's the fulfillment of all fulfillment with it. And then to do it for my team and I get to make the phone call. I don't know. I mean, you really think about that in terms of hierarchy of emotion. I don't know how you top that. I can tell you this. My background, before I got my doctorate in psychology, I graduated from law school. And to me, when I walked across that stage from law school, that to me was one of the most powerful moments, one of the most proud moments for me personally. But it paled in comparison when I watched Colin walk across the stage. It was Colin walking across that stage from law school was so much more powerful for me. When I got my master's, it paled in comparison to when Colin, got his. And my daughter's getting her doctorate in psychology. And I can tell you, when they hood her for her doctorate, I hate the phrase, you have to be a parent to understand being a parent, because I think, but I think you do in regards to, it's an emotional feeling that you can't understand unless you're a parent, of just how much love there is. And to see that father make that phone call. Now, I didn't see that live because I was at the draft. So I only saw it on ESPN that night. But when I saw it, it was just, wow, like, oh my gosh, how great must that have been as a dad to experience that. Yeah, I think it's awesome. And they're heartwarming stories. I mean, that's just a great story.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a great story. And our next question kind of goes to the opposite end of the spectrum, as far as, disappointment versus jubilee. Because as we all know, emotions are complex, right? And I think Trey mentioned something about a jungle gym and not a ladder, which was success is a jungle gym and not a ladder, which is also emotions. It's a jungle gym, because they are complex. It can be challenging to manage, right? And sometimes players end up falling in the draft and don't get selected as early as they thought, which this year's example is Will Levis, a quarterback who some thought could, be one of the first players to be drafted in the entire draft, right? Yet he ended up falling out of the first round, and he was there with his family and everything, and there were obviously a lot of emotions. How difficult do you think it is for guys to deal with such disappointment, especially on this level, this national level where everybody is watching? There's a lot of people there. probably even more than a football game, maybe. So like what words or advice, like what words of advice do you have for this, like Will Levis or anybody else that maybe experiences this kind of, disappointment or this amount of emotion that's so negative?
Yeah. I I think the first thing to remember in all of this is that this goes back years. I mean, when you think of it, I can go back to Aaron Rodgers getting picked number 24 by the Packers when people were thinking he was going to be the number 1 pick or in the top 5. I remember Geno Smith. They were talking out of West Virginia. He was going to be the number 1 pick, and if not number 1, number 3. And then all of a sudden, he got to the second round, 7th pick by the Jets with the Johnny Manziel. I remember I was at the draft at Radio City, and the Jaguars needed a quarterback at that point. And I thought, we're taking Johnny Manziel. We had the 3rd pick. And then from out of nowhere, and when I say out of nowhere, the Jacksonville Jaguars select Blake Bortles. You talk about shock. You talk about, no one saw that coming. But it was going to be Johnny Manziel, the Heisman Trophy winner. Blake Bortles. And Johnny Manziel ends up getting picked 22nd by the Browns. Now, the interesting thing about Johnny Manziel, and here's where I'm going with this, is that leading up to him being picked, number 22, at the start of the draft, ESPN announced his name or talked about him 113 times prior to being picked. So he was being talked about all the time, but not being picked. Now imagine being Johnny Manziel and watching that and watching it go down. You look at Will Levis, right? And you look, people were talking about he might be the number 1 pick. He could be the number 3. He could go to the Colts. Maybe, who knows where he'll end up going. They'll move up, move down. The problem is, and this is what I would get across if these were my clients as a sports psychologist, is we don't know anything. We don't know anything. There's so much social media and talk and buzz, but we don't know what's going on in those draft rooms. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And what I would tell these top guys is that you're going to be picked. You're going to be picked. This is not a will you be picked or not. You will end up being picked. But you have to realize to embrace the moment. Embrace the moment. You will be selected. You will be going to the NFL, and you will get to prove yourself. Tom Brady, I mean, I'm going to talk about the Tom Brady story. You guys know the Tom Brady stories. I'm not going to go there. It doesn't matter where you get picked. What matters is you get to play and you prove yourself with things. It does matter financially. Let's be honest. Every time you're not being picked, you're losing money. Every time. The difference between being picked in the 1st round and being picked in the 2nd round is a huge difference from a financial compensation level. But ultimately, you will get picked. And you can use it as your motive, as your incentive. Maurice Jones-Drew wears number 32. He used to wear number 32 because he was selected 32nd in the draft. I don't know if you know that. And he was angry because he thought he was a 1st round pick, and he was actually the 1st pick in the 2nd round. So he used number 32 as motivation as a running back to be selected. My point is that there's going to be a lot of disappointment. There's always going to be. You brought it up before with Brady Quinn. He's probably the most popular person sitting in that green room, waiting and waiting. But what I would say, the one thing I wish Will Levis had done is I wish he would have stayed for the 2nd round. He left. He left. And he missed his moment. He missed his moment to walk on stage because he wasn't picked in the 1st round. And I wish he would have stayed to have that moment, because just because you weren't picked in the 1st round, so what? You'll get picked. You'll get chosen. It's okay with it. But you have to learn how to handle the highs and the lows. It comes with the territory. But I would say, if I come back to the original question, we don't know anything. We don't know anything. I mean, everybody knew Trevor Lawrence would be taken 1st. After that, who knows? When I'm talking about last year's draft, when I'm talking about winning Cleveland 2 years ago. Sometimes you know who the number 1 pick, is going to be. Carson Palmer talks about when he went to the NFL draft, he had already signed his contract with the Bengals at that time. You were allowed to do that. So even though they were on the clock, he knew he was being picked. So there was never any anxiety, for him. He didn't have that moment of anxiety. But for most guys, it's just a wait and see.
which is great advice. So I'm wondering, whether you have your uh, psychologist hat on, whether you use your law degree and put an agent hat on, or whether you just keep your dad hat on. Are there any other lessons that you would, say to someone, and just in general with the draft and the highs and lows and everything going on?
Sure. Without a doubt, it would be embrace the moment, be in the moment. Where you're sitting here at the NFL draft, you get to be, and you will play in what 99.99% of the world will never be able to do. And you will get to play in the NFL on Sundays. And you want to embrace this moment with your family, and you want to enjoy it, and you want to recognize that it's finite. As good as you are, at some point you're going to get old, or you might get injured, but right now you have the opportunity to go to the NFL draft, and don't let all of the other things get in the way of embracing this incredible moment in time where you lose sight of the big picture. It would be a big picture moment. Recognize where you are in this moment. Yeah.
Love that. I love that. Recognize where you are in the moment, and also let's talk about the future a little bit. The draft is done,
Yep.
free agency for the most part is wrapped up for the most part, again, for the most part. Let's hear your prediction. Who's winning the Super Bowl this year?
Yeah. Well, I often joke that the NFL draft, they should rename it the the NFL Day of Hope, because everybody goes in like, this is it. Tell you guys a quick funny story with the NFL draft this year. When you go to the NFL draft, if you ever go, the fans are intense. The fans can be angry. The fans can be riled up and stuff like that. But in Kansas City this year, they just came off winning a Super Bowl. They were in the best mood. They were having the time of their life. And they were going, just make my already awesome team better. Now let's just make our awesome team better with it. And that's how I look at this year. Until somebody can knock Kansas City off, Kansas City is the team to beat. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is that good. Patrick Mahomes, 3 of the last 4 Super Bowls, the guy has been there. He's that talented. So until someone tells me Kansas City is not the team to beat, Kansas City is the team to beat. I will say this. We are in an NFL time where you cannot win without an elite quarterback. I don't care how good your defense is. I don't care how good your cornerbacks are. I don't care how good your running back is. If you don't have an elite quarterback, you're not getting past the first round of the NFL. So I look at certain teams and go, the Bengals, even the Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence, the Ravens with Lamar Jackson. I look at certain teams and go, they have a much better chance than other teams who don't have the quarterback. So I'm going to go Kansas City. But I will say, whatever 2 teams are there, they're going to be 2 teams with elite quarterbacks. Yeah.
So with that, that's a great way to segue to my opinion before we kind of get closer to our last question. First off, is Tua Tagovailoa an elite quarterback in your eyes?
Okay, here's the thing with Tua.
No.
First off, I'm going to say I wanted Tua. So I would be, when he was available, I had said to Colin, I want him. When he was at Alabama, I wanted him. With that being said, the way quarterbacks are built today, Tua is not an elite quarterback. I think to be the elite quarterback today, I think you have to have a certain physical presence to you. I think you have to be able to take the hits with things. I think and I don't know if Tua's body and makeup and the way he plays, if he's going to be able to sustain concussions or just sustain the NFL, the hits that they take. So I want him to be elite. I think Tua's a great guy. He is, and I wanted him. So but is he elite? No. Can he get Miami to the playoffs? Yes. But is he better than Josh Allen? Is he better than Aaron Rodgers in the league? Is he better than Joe Burrow? Is he better than Trevor Lawrence? Is he better than Lamar? Is he better? There are a lot of people you got to leapfrog. So I don't know. What's your thought? Do you think he's elite? I think he's good. I don't think he's elite.
Yeah, I think Trey's a Dolphins fan.
if I didn't show my bias, I'm definitely a Dolphins fan. But yeah, listen, the guy was a Heisman Trophy candidate. I know college is not the NFL. injury concerns, not only just from a fan perspective, from a person and former football player perspective. Multiple concussions in the season is always scary, so I definitely hope he's okay in that regard and he stays healthy. I'm hoping for the best. I'm excited to see how he teams up with Mike McDaniel, and we got a track team in Miami, so
Yes,
hopefully
you do.
it's all out quick. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, they can do
Yes.
their thing. So it's just overall, most of my time as a Dolphin fan has been in football fan poverty. So I'm just excited to see a team that can put up some points. So we'll see where things go.
Right. But you raised the point of being a Dolphin fan, and I think this is where the NFL is shifted. And by the way, you do have a track team there. I mean, you guys, you really do. But when I go back to when I grew up with the Dolphins, I grew up with Bob Greasy, who was an elite quarterback for the time. He was an elite quarterback, Hall of Famer. But the Dolphins also won with David Woodley. They won with Don Strock. You can't do that today. You're not going to win with Mitch Trubisky today. You'll win some games, but you're not going to. I don't think the Steelers can win or get to the next level with Kenny Pickett. I don't. So I think it's a different time, where you used to be able to run and pound and good defense. The Baltimore Ravens of the early 2000s, I mean, they won with that defense. That was the defense that they won with. I think those days are. You still need a good defense, but what you need is an elite offense today. So.
But yeah, we might need to have a spinoff, like a flawless sports section of the organization.
A podcast.
We can talk sports all day, but I do want to leave you off with one last question, kind of shifting gears back into mental health and wellness. As we all see, sports is something that offers inspiration, connection, and hope. So with our final question, I'd like to ask you, what is giving you hope right now that we are kind of moving closer to a more ideal and flawless world?
I think there are a couple of things. I think first off, the ability to be able to talk about what we're all really feeling right now. I will say this as a psychologist, never in my life, ever in my 30 years as a psychologist, have I gotten more phone calls and more referrals than at this time. I think people are hurting. I think the anxiety level is high in people. I think depression is high. I think there's a lot going on. But I also believe that that's also because that people are now much more open to getting help. I think people are much more aware that, we are going through a tough time, and there are people out there who can help with things. And we're able to talk about our emotions, talk about our feelings. And I think people genuinely know that by nature, people are good. I think people are really good and they want to help. And I think we have to surround ourselves with others. I think we have to ask each other for comfort when we need comfort. And I think we need certain things as well. I think one of the things that sports does for us is for a few hours, it takes us out of reality and allows us to be a part of something that's not our job, that's not our stress, that's not our pressure. That's why it becomes so personal when our team loses. That's why sometimes when we lose a game and it wrecks us, it because our team has become personal to us, as if it's ours with things. But I really believe that the world is by nature good. And if we use each other in the right way and help each other in the right way, we're on the right path.
Wonderfully said.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, George, for joining us today. We had an awesome
This was
conversation.
great. Yeah. This was great. You guys are wonderful. It was a pleasure speaking with both of you.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. It was great to hear all your perspectives. But yeah, stay flawless and have a great day.
Have a great one.
See you guys.